whether it is an invasion. So, Dr. Els, I give it to you.
Yes. Okay, so in the past, this was taken as a matter of course that if the Aryans were first not in India and then later they were in India, it must have been a military conquest.
Mm-hmm.
And this was moreover deemed to be confirmed when they discovered a number of corpses in the streets of Mohenjo-Daro, when they said, you see, this is the doing of the Aryans. Indra, the storm god or war god of the Aryans, stands accused. You see, he's ultimately guilty of this massacre. Now, it turned out to be a mistake. These people had died because of disease.
Mm-hmm.
But the general picture, at any rate, with or without this incident, remained that the Aryans couldn't have come there except by a military conquest. Now, in the last few years, many invasionists have become very squeamish about the military sounding term invasion. And so they insist that there was no invasion, that there was only an immigration. And they have to do that because archaeology hasn't thrown up any sign of an invasion. So it comes in handy when you don't say invasion but immigration. It is like they immigrated under the radar.
All
They
right.
left no trace, right?
Mm-hmm.
And yet, and yet they changed the entire outlook of India. They changed its religion. They changed its language over more than half a subcontinent.
Mm-hmm.
So they did all this after an immigration that nobody noticed. That is a bit of a tall order. And so some people within the invasionist camp ridicule this scenario,
Mm-hmm.
like Bernard Sergent, writer of Histoire de l'Inde, History of India. He was the son of two parents who were both active in the resistance against the Nazi occupation of France in the Second World War. And so, you see, he knew from experience that invasion is a very real phenomenon. I mean, it's also elsewhere. Why do the Americans speak English and not Algonquin or Nahuatl or so? It is because there was an invasion, there was a military conquest.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is not so exceptional. And, it's quite reasonable to assume in principle that indeed there was an invasion in the sense of a military conquest. Now, strictly speaking, um, an invasion need not even mean a military conquest. I am, for instance, reminded of the French ex president Valéry Giscard d'Estaing, who was commenting on the situation in France that you have many North African immigrants. And so he called their massive presence an invasion. Now, by that, he did not mean that there had been a military conquest by these North African immigrants. No, what he meant was immigrants adapt to the reigning culture of the country where they immigrate, whereas invaders impose their own ways, their own order on the natives. And so he had the impression that more and more these North Africans were imposing their way of life
Mm-hmm.
on the environment that they came into rather than the other way around. Now, I'm not at all holding a brief for Valéry Giscard d'Estaing's position or the opposite. I'm only drawing attention to the sense in which he uses this word. So, invasion need not even mean a military conquest. It is not about the means used to immigrate, military or other, but the end. You see, at the end, in an invasion, you have a reversal of the power equation where the intruders are in power and the natives who took it for granted that they were empowered in their own country
Mm-hmm.
suddenly find themselves uh, disfavored or even oppressed. And so, if in the case of India, the invaders managed to impose even their language, I mean, your mother tongue is something fairly intimate. If you lose that, you've been really overpowered. their religion also, their arts, and so on. Well, you see, I think it is totally fair to speak of an invasion. And indeed, many of the people who insist on calling it immigration rather than invasion, you see, if you scratch them, they turn out to be invasionists anyway. Like they draw attention to the military advantages that some of the newly brought instruments of the Aryans are supposed to be, especially the horse drawn chariots. You see, that was something new, and they construe that as the tank, as the Panzer, as Witzel calls it in German, of the invading Aryans. So you see, there again, why should they need military advantages if their conquest was so peaceful? So you see, on all hands, this can fairly be called an invasion.